everyone. Welcome to our small group instruction in remote setting brought to you by the Grosse Point Literacy Learning Network. And one thing that we would really love to lift from our vision and mission is the innovation that our classroom teachers have had through our remote learning thus far. And wanting to point out that anything that we are talking about in this presentation could apply in a remote setting or if we pivot to an in-person setting. So before we get started, let's pause and reflect about how do you feel about teaching reading groups remotely? So I want you to take a moment to pause and think, looking at that colored block, I want you to take a moment to think, would you put yourself at yellow, the green, the blue, or the purple of how comfortable you're feeling? Just take a moment to think about that. We'll come back to that visual later in our presentation. So for the outcomes for today, we are going to review the essential practice number 3, how to set up our remote small groups for success, and to share some resources and strategies that you can use in your remote reading groups. And again, these strategies, if we pivot to a hybrid plan, they will definitely apply to in-person or remote. And I love this quote of, "A mind when stretched by a new idea never regains its original dimensions." And so think today, as we are having a discussion, I want you to think, what is a new idea that has pushed and shifted your thinking? So one thing that we want to lift is that all of our instruction that we do, regardless if it is in remote, hybrid, in person, it should be kind of anchored in our essential practices. And essential practice number 3 in the K3 and the 4-5 is small group instruction. And small group instruction can be flexible. It is based on strategies. And one thing that I just love in both of these that I'm pointing out is that it says it's observed and assessed of how you are putting kids in these groups. And I feel like as teachers, you observe your kids every day. So if you notice something in one of your small groups, and that is an observation, that might be cause for you to change or shift them to another group. And that's what small group instruction is being responsive to those kids' needs, either observing them or assessing them. So setting up your small groups, thinking about before you even start your small reading groups, what are some things that you might do to build success in your small groups? And you could pull your small groups thinking about it. You might have already started some small groups. So think about, as we're talking about this, what are some things that have gone well with some of your small groups? Have you pulled them heterogeneously, that they're kids at different levels, so you're starting to build those relationships? In those small groups, you might be setting your expectations or your intentions or norms, just like you would in person. So thinking about virtually, if you were to have 4 or 5 kids in a small group or a breakout room, setting those expectations. Is there an expectation with the chat bar? Is there an expectation of materials that they should bring? Is there an expectation with how they are to take turns talking and sharing? Those are things that if you haven't even leveled your kids or know where they are at with their assessments or observations yet, you can start building that groundwork by just building those relationships and expectations. You can also work out some of those technical issues of, maybe you're a little nervous about pulling breakout rooms or small groups, and just giving yourself that permission to try that. Today we're going to try these breakout rooms, and we are going to talk about some expectations and giving yourself permission to try out those technical issues. So what might be some other ideas in your small groups at the beginning of the year that you might be thinking of, or some things that have worked well? Another idea that we have in our Coaches Connection September newsletter, all of this presentation will be linked on our Schoology page, which I'll have the code at the end. But there in our Coaches September newsletter, we had some ideas of different things you could do in your small group. For example, a purposeful show and tell. You might have kids bring a favorite book and discuss a favorite book. And again, that might be setting up those expectations of how you take turns sharing. You might have kids bring a picture that elicits a story that they might want to share, just building that language and building relationships. And again, while you're doing it, you're probably making observations about your children, their needs, and who might even work well together, maybe who might not be a great partnership. And there, down at the bottom, we have some strategies for small groups as well that you can click on. So some considerations for small group instruction brought to us by Nell Duke, who wrote The Essential Practices. And these considerations for small group instruction are for in-person, but they also apply so much to a remote. And one thing that really stands out to me is to consider that time management, that we really want to be mindful of the time that we are spent in our small group remotely or in person, that it's impactful and meaningful and doesn't go on and on and on where we're losing their interest, and that we're balancing out the instruction and the application. And so when you are giving some of that instructive piece, that they also have that active engagement. And we'll talk about some active engagement pieces in just a moment. But you can kind of think to yourself, are there some ideas right now that you're starting to think about that you might have as an active engagement piece while you're in small group? So while you're pulling those breakout rooms or small groups, what are the rest of your students doing? Some may be reading independently. They might be writing independently, doing some word games independently, doing Lexia. They might be in a breakout room, working on a project. Something that was lifted to me from one of a classroom teacher that I thought was a really great idea was, if you did your mini lesson in your reading or even in writing, and you did your mini lesson and the students had their book, you see they had their book, and they were now independently reading. If the teacher told the students to put their book down, then as the kids are reading, they could take their computer to a comfy, cozy spot, and they could see that they were reading, but they were also in earshot that if the teacher called over and said, Lucy, Beth, Tommy, Ian, Enzo, your turn for a reading for a small group, then they can hear, they can turn their computer up, and then they could come and join the small group. The other students would have their camera down and would still be reading in their comfy, cozy spot, or they might be online doing Lexia, or if it's writing workshop, they might have their pencil down and doing their writing with them. That's just one idea. Another idea that has been lifted to the group is that you might have students in breakout rooms where you might have done your whole group lesson. You might then pull some of those students in a breakout room and then have let the other ones go. And then you might have time set that students come back in. Whatever works for your style would definitely work for your students. And so that just might take some time playing around with what feels right for you. What are some other ideas that you're thinking of? What are some other things that have worked well for you? So we want to set our groups up for success. And one thing that I know with any type of Zoom or group, what is really beneficial is starting out again with that expectation and building that community with everyone gets to have one quick little share or something that they are able to connect with the group. And I know in the spring when I was doing small groups, always coming in and having that one thing that they could share, they already knew what they wanted to say, just something to lift to the group. And they anticipated it and they loved that. And it took, maybe took a couple of minutes, but I felt that that really, in the times we are right now when we are in Zoom, that's really important. And again, if we pivot to in person, you might not need to have that share, but again, building whatever expectation you want at the beginning. The other thing is to be predictable, to maximize that time. So if it's materials, every time you have a small group remotely, you might have either they need a whiteboard or they might need a piece of paper and a pencil. And that might be every time they come. It might be a set of stick-it notes. It might be obviously if you've provided some books with their take home, whatever material you want them to come with, always having the same thing is very helpful. It will set a small group up with a predictable flow so students know exactly what to expect. The other thing to set your groups up for success is to give them some of those talk stems to help that academic discourse. Sometimes students, it's not that they don't want to participate, it's sometimes they just don't know what to say. And I know as adults, sometimes we don't know what to say. So if you have a board in the back, or you might have in your chat bar, you might even just put a talk stem up for the students. I agree with you. I would like to add, I used to think, but. And so that just helps that academic discourse. So again, it provides that opportunity that they're able to engage and not just sit there. Again, lifting the point of bringing the balance between instruction and application, that active engagement. So bringing us to the active engagement, after you have introed the book, looking at your Jan Richardson lessons, of looking at how you might have your book introduction, maybe a little bit of word work, depending, sight word work if you are in the earlier stages. If you're in transitional, you might be lifting a vocabulary word, and then talking about a strategy that you might be working on. After you've done some of the teacher talk, and now it's time for that active engagement where the students will be reading, you will be popping in and listening into their reading. I know I've had a teacher say that she might have all of the students in a separate breakout room so she could then pop in and listen in to them quietly read and then pop out and then pop into the next student. You might have them bring them back together and do a little bit of a shared reading on a piece for fluency in that book. And then when you're done with the active engagement, with the word work part, there are some things that you can do with word work and sight words where you can write sight words or some of the high frequency words. That can be even to start with the early stages with your Just Right books. The word work after your reading, you could be working on doing some of the sound boxes, the analogy charts, the writing a big word, the circling in syllables and words. And what the sound boxes are, let me get this here. So sound boxes, you could have your students make a box like this, and if you were having them stretch out a word, it could be like ah. So those would be like sound boxes. The analogy chart, let me get this here. The analogy chart is kind of just like a T-chart, but then you can make different boxes here. So you might have words like this, cop and cope. And then the analogy chart, if I said the word make that had a long vowel, they would have to put it right here. If I said Mac that would have a short vowel, they would have to put it here. So that could be your analogy chart. The writing big words would be where if you were to clap out syllables, for example, if I were going to have my maybe transitional readers at the end do the word interesting, and I wanted them to write a big word, I would have them clap the syllables in, ter, est, ing. They would count the syllables and then write each syllable and then write their big word. And then just circling syllables in a word. You might actually write the word interesting and then have them circle the syllables. Those are some ways for the active engagement. The other thing is you can respond in the chat with the number of syllables. So you might, if you had interesting, you might put 4 in the chat. Again, that reaction with the emoji. The other thing you might do or consider is to have a guided writing piece. So if you had them always bringing a whiteboard or a piece of paper, which you would be doing with your word work and high frequency work, you could have put up a prompt where they might do a couple sentences of a guided writing, or it might be a dictated sentence. And with the dictated sentence, they might be writing about something that went with their book that they were reading. Excuse me while I find my book. So you might have a dictated sentence of, I hope they are big white horses. And so I hope they are big white horses. And then you would guide them through a dictated sentence. That would be an active engagement. The other thing is a think, ink, share. And so a thinking share is after you read the book in your small group, they might think about it, and then they would have time to jot their thoughts from the comprehension prompt, and then you would do turn and talk with a share, and you could do a turn and talk in a breakout room, or you could in the whole group have turns sharing with that. So thinking about materials, this is the biggest thing, the leveled reading materials to accompany literacy footprints. Some of our buildings have literacy footprints, and if you do not have literacy footprints, there is a document at the bottom I'm going to open in just a moment that will have some guided reading books at different levels that you can use. So if you are using literacy footprints, reading A to Z, or some of the document books that we have shared that are free, you have access to them through this document. So what you would do is you would open this and you would make a copy of this document. And as this is opening, it can be literacy footprints or whatever you are using. We are using literacy footprints at our school, and so that's why we have this here. So what this document is it will house all of the leveled sight word list and phonetic word lists as well. Let me just make sure I have my book here. There we go. Okay, so here is a how-to video, which I will share with you.
Hello all, I'm Stephanie Earhart and I am Richard's literacy coach and reading specialist, and I wanted to share a document with you. This is our leveled reading materials to accompany literacy footprints. And this document is created to house every level and the sight words and the phonics work that you are going to have at that level. And what is so great about this is you can create your student grouping after you do your assessments, have your friends in your different group. And then these pages are meant to be your lesson plan for that small group. And this is just an example here, and I'll show you how to go about that. So let's say I have a level E group, let's say right here. What you could do is you could duplicate this slide by right-clicking, and you hit duplicate slide. I've already done that. The reason you want to duplicate the slide is so that you can always have that fresh copy. After you duplicate the slide, then what you can do is I have made in red literacy footprints. The only thing you need to change or add would be the book. So I had gone to my literacy footprints. I had clicked the URL and then right-clicked, copied that. And then you would insert a link by right-clicking your link, and then you would insert the book right there. So it's an easy click. And then I made this in red. Something else I would change would be a dictated sentence for this group. So my dictated sentence, either on a whiteboard or a notebook, would be mom went up, mom went down, mom went zooming all around. So now for my small group, I have the materials I need, and I was able to do that probably in about 2 minutes. You have your Google Slides that will have your sight words. When you click into that, they'll be brought up where you could present them they're almost like flashcards. You could do a little word work like Jan Richardson has, where maybe they write them first and then you share them, or just even have them practice reading them. The phonics work comes from her leveled book work from the Next Step Forward in Word Study and Phonics. And you can go to page 124 for level E, words that are a focus. And the focus phonics work would be initial blends and onset in rhyme. And that would be thinking after you have read the book, or maybe a second day, but we wanted to have those materials there for you. And then obviously your book and then your sentence. So this might be a lesson plan that you might keep for a couple of days with your group, but everything is right there. And you can change it and work on it, and it takes about 2 minutes. So you'll notice that every group, we have their sight words and their phonics work, and then you can just add at the bottom the book you want, and then if there's any writing component that you would like to extend that. What we would suggest then is once you have your groups, maybe you have a level E, maybe a level I, level M, and a Q. I'm just coming up with ideas. Then you could just drag that into a new document for your weekly lesson plans, and then you would always have your master copy. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask, but I hope that you find these resources helpful. Thank you.
All right, so that document, you will have all of the leveled resources. And again, that will be helpful regardless if we are remote or in person. So if you do not have Reading A to Z or Literacy Footprints, you can use this document here, and you would make a copy. There it goes. And in this document, I have to give shout outs to Beth Rainbolt, who put this beautiful document together. She is like the slides queen. So this houses a lot of different resources. Not only could you use them for guided reading, you might even use a few of them for a whole group activity. We have some read alouds that some of our GP teachers did in the spring. We have some phonics videos, some sight word activities, some different websites, short vowel work, and then here is the place where we have all the leveled reader resources. So what you'll see is you'll see the level, you'll see a book and a comprehension activity. Some of them, many of them, we have a video to help build background, because we know some of these books might have concepts that might be new to students. So it's very important that we build that background before reading, because background knowledge is very impactful of how well a child can read a book. If they have background knowledge, they're well, it will be well received and they will be more successful. So you'll notice that we have different levels here. And so these links in these books, what you would do if you had a level O and you wanted to bring this book up, you would just bring that book up there and you can copy the link and have that book. You could copy the video if you wanted, and the extension or the comprehension guide. And so we wanted to provide some materials for you. These are materials that even if we were in person, you could print some of these as well. We wanted to give an option for parents, teachers, families, that you could view them digitally, but they also had the option for you to print them as well. And I cannot say enough great things about our phonics word work that is in this book, The Next Step Forward in Word Study and Phonics. So if you want to take your word study group a tad bit further, it will have the different levels and it will pull out some word work for you. All right, so we wanted to have you watch a few of Jan Richardson. She models some teaching of guided reading remotely. We do have Nell Duke modeling some small group instruction. That is an hour video, and that would be something that we would love to lift it another time, or if you want to dig into that again on your own, that is an hour by itself, which is definitely worth the time, but would be maybe too much time right now. All right, this takes us to Jan Richardson's website. And right here, the teaching guided reading remotely, she has this broken down into 4 days. Looking at your schedule with your small groups, you might not see the same small group 4 days in a row. So keep that in mind, that you might combine the day 1 and day 2, and you might combine the day 3 and day 4 activities that she's going to lift.
Hi, I'm Jan Richardson. We're going to be reading the book Cat People, Dog People, and Gecko People. Pause the video if you need to get your book. What about you? Are you a cat person, a dog person, or a gecko person? There are different personalities that match different kinds of pets. And that's what we're going to be reading about today. Before you read, let's look through the book and maybe discover some new vocabulary. Turn to page 2 and 3. On page 3, you'll find a word in bold print, stereotypes. Put your finger under it. Notice that words that are in bold print can be found in the back of the glossary. So if you don't know what a stereotype is, use your glossary. On pages 4 and 5, you're going to be seeing other types of pets. Turn to page 6 and 7. In this chapter, you're going to be reading about exotic pets. Find the word exotic on page 6. An exotic means, well, why don't you go to the glossary and find out. Unique and different. See, some people don't have a cat or a dog. They might have a hedgehog or a squirrel. Turn the page. Take a look at the photographs. On page 8, I want you to find the word eccentric. It looks like this. Eccentric also means odd and maybe a little different. You're going to read to find out how some people like a pet that's a little different, a little eccentric. Do you know someone who's a little different or eccentric? Can you use that word in a sentence? Turn to the page 10. You'll notice another bold-faced word on this page, potential. And potential means to reach whatever's possible for you. For example, you have the potential to be anybody you want. You can be the President of the United States, a teacher, a fireman. You have the potential to do anything. It's possible. In this book, they talk about how personalities can predict potential pet preferences, but sometimes people don't always choose those preferences. People are different. Turn the page. Go to page 15. There's a word on this page that's a little tricky. You probably have heard this word before, but you might not recognize it when you see it. In this word, the P is silent. When you see a P and an S together, it's going to be silent. And the CH is pronounced like a K. This is the word psychologist. Find it in your book. Run your finger under it as you say psychologist. And you probably know a psychologist or somebody who is in your school that is a psychologist. Now, as you read today, you're going to be doing yellow questions. This means that after every page or two, you'll stop and you'll ask your parent a yellow question, or your parent might ask you a yellow question. And a yellow question is a question that asks you to compare two things. How are cats and dogs different? It might ask you to talk about how something is similar, or you might ask your parents a question that starts with what caused, or what are the examples of. So as you read, stop and either ask a question or have your parent or sibling ask you a question to answer. Pause the video and come back when you're ready. Welcome back. You probably asked questions as you were reading, but I just have a few questions for you to talk about with your mom or dad or perhaps your sibling. So pause the video after each question and discuss it. What are some personalities that match a dog person or a cat person? What are some exceptions to a personality match? Why do some pets end up in shelters? I'd like to show you something about the word potential. Let's make that word. P-O, 10. And now we need shul. It doesn't have an SH though. It's T-I-A-L. Say the word potential. And remember, that means what's possible. You have the potential to be anybody you want. You can be President of the United States, a teacher, a fireman, a doctor. That's your potential. And in this word, the TI says shh, just like in these other words. See if you can read this word. Partial. How about this word? Portion. And in every case, the TI says shh.
All right. You'll notice with what she's doing remotely, it's something you would do in person. And so as teachers, we want to use our instincts of what you would even do in person to lift that and bring that remotely. Some of the resources that she was sharing with the yellow cards, I will share a link at the end that will have Jan Richardson's website with a little code results or footholds you have to type in, and then you get all of those resources if you don't already have them. So here's something else, the rereading the book using keyword summary strategy that we will share. And as we're watching these videos, think about an idea, even if it's one new idea that you might bring into your small group remotely or in person.
Today, you're going to reread Cat People, Dog People, Gecko People with a different comprehension focus. We're going to use the keyword summary. As you read today, you're going to jot down important words from each page, maybe 2 or 3 words for each page. You're going to write them in your journal. And then when you finish a chapter, you'll use those words to summarize the chapter. Think about the headings, maybe some bold-faced words, or words that are repeated. These are often the most important words. Let me show you. Follow along with me on page 2. Pet personalities. Dog lovers agree, dogs make loyal, loving pets. They rush to greet you and offer comfort on hard days. Some people believe that cats, on the other hand, don't care about your bad day. If I were to pick one word from this page that I think is important, it would be personalities, because it's in the heading, and this is all about different kinds of personalities that we assign to either a dog or to a cat. So continue reading the book and jot down those keywords for each page. I'll see you soon. I hope you enjoyed reading that book again. Sometimes we learn new things when we read a book again. I'd like to ask you a few questions. I want you to turn to page 15. Why do you think the author included this chapter, Making a Match? You can pause the video and talk about it with your parent. Do you think it's important that people choose pets that match their personality? We're going to do one more thing with this book. Now that you have written down keywords for each chapter, I'd like you to go back to your list and circle 4 or 5 of the most important words. Then use those words to write a summary of the book. Pause the video and work with your parent. I'm going to show you possible words that you could have chosen. You don't have to choose the exact same words, but I think pets, personalities, match, and shelters, I think those are important. And if I were to take those words, I could make a summary out of it, that people often choose pets that match their personalities. And if these matches are successful, we'll have fewer pets that are put into shelters.
All right. You'll notice that it was a rereading day and it just had a different comprehension focus. And so you might pick your comprehension focus of what you would want on that day 1, and then maybe do that guided writing on a day 2. Here is the guided writing video. And again, this would be something as for the active engagement that your students would always know to bring that piece of paper and a whiteboard with them, and always bring it even on day 1 and a day 2.
Today, we're going to write about cat people, dog people, and gecko people. Here is your prompt. Explain how personality and pet ownership go together. Before you start to write, you want to plan with some key words. I'd like you to make a T-chart in your notebook. Put pet in the first column and personality in the second, because those are the things that we are comparing. You can stop the video at any time if you need to have more time to write. In the first column, you want to list the 2 animals that this book is mostly about. That's right, cats and dogs. Now, you're going to use what you read and list some personalities that are connected to cats and some that are connected to dogs. Now, you can use your book to get some ideas. For example, on page 4, you're going to find words there that talk about pet cats. For example, there was the word curious. You might add another word for cats. And then pick a word for dogs, maybe even 2. Once you create your plan, then you'll be able to write a paragraph of how cat owners match the personality of cats and how dog owners match the personality of dogs.
All right, and you can see that the guided writing really lifts the comprehension. And again, the word study that is brought to you by Jan herself from this book that we will watch next.
Today we're going to do some word study. We're going to work with the affix inter, which means between, or sometimes it can mean together. For example, if there's an international crisis, like there has been recently with the coronavirus, that's an international crisis, then it is between all of the countries, between all of the nations. Now we're going to make a big word that has inter in it. Now to do this word, you're going to need either magnetic letters or letter cards. You could even write these letters on a Post-it note. You're going to need an A, a C, E, 2 I's, 2 N's, an O, R, and 2 T's. Pause the video while you get your letters. The word you're going to make is from the story, interaction. In the story, it talked about how dogs like to have social interactions. They like to go to the dog park, but we don't have cat parks. So what I'd like you to do is clap the parts to interaction. Interaction. Now, take your letters or your letter cards and make the word. You can pause the video if you need more time. Check your word here. Now what I'd like you to do is break the word into 4 parts. Clap the word again and break it as you hear those parts. Break it apart. Check here. Now let's tap under the words and say the parts. Interaction. You see, it's an action between 2 people or 2 animals is an interaction. Now mix and fix that word once more.
All right, so thinking about those videos that we just watched, let's come back here. I want you to think, to pause and reflect about what are some big takeaways from the video. You need to think, what's something, was it a comprehension focus? Was it some of the guided writing? Was it some of the word work? So jot down something that you could see yourself incorporating in your small group remotely or even virtually. So you can pause the video if you would like to take a moment. or we can just go on. But again, from that first quote we had, shifting your mind, adding something new to your repertoire that now it will never go back to how it was before, where we're expanding those thoughts of what we can do and being that innovative teacher that you all have been. Here are some digital resources for leveled books that, again, we are sharing a document that has some with the links already embedded, but there's Learning A to Z. Again, when we share this, these are all linked in. We have our digital footprints, Epic, ReadWorks, Mel Library, Newsela, and then we did put Lexia as a resource. It might not have leveled books, but there are some leveled resources with the skill builders, and we have some resources as well that we'll share as literacy coaches that will have the skill builders attached with another document, with another PD that we have done. So now that we have discussed our small group instruction and knowing that all of the great things that you do instinctively in person when you were doing for maybe years and years before, or maybe in your student teaching, and now you're doing them remotely, having that instinct and seeing that when you're doing it remotely, it's very similar. Now, how do you feel about teaching reading groups remotely? Again, when we originally looked at this, you might have put yourself at yellow. Hopefully now you're in the green bar. If you were at the green, hopefully you're in the blue. If you're in the blue, hopefully you're in the purple, and that we're just moving forward. If it is the resources, hopefully we're able to share some resources with you. If it are some of the ideas and just that permission to practice and set your groups up for success. Or if it's just the fact of thinking about the essentials and how what we've done in person, we can somehow make that happen in a remote setting as well. If there are any questions or feedback that you would like to give, please do that. You can join our Schoology page, and we love to have conversations. We have our weekly coaching conversations Wednesdays at 2:30 that we would love to see you, or post some questions to us in our Schoology page, or you can always email us. So this presentation will be housed in our Schoology page, which is right here, our link, and we are in this together, and if we can help be a support in any way and help walk alongside you and help guide and have a conversation, we are definitely here. And best of luck as you explore these new waters ahead.